So when did you guys officially get started with the business?
Officially, we opened in March of 2017.
Okay. Wow.
I started roasting coffee back in 2012.
Okay.
Just in my apartment bathroom for venting purposes, and then graduated to a basement. It was just a hobby.
Yeah.
At that point.
I never thought about that with the ventilation to do it in the basement. That makes a hell of a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that? Did you have like one of the manual roasters? Where you have to like turn the spindle as it goes.
No, it was essentially a 1980s version of like a popcorn maker.
Okay.
That Metthe, this coffee brand, made at one point. It was not a well-made product.
Yeah.
I found it in a thrift shop in Hilton Head, South Carolina. My wife and I were between jobs and moving different states. So we had a friend down there, put us up for a month and lived, South Carolina life for a month. So we got thrifty shopping.
Yeah.
Found that little 1980s popcorn maker.
That's cool.
And that's how it all got started.
Were you into coffee before you found it, or was it just kind of like you found it and then decided to get into coffee?
I was maybe more of a coffee nerd than most. My dad, I grew up to a coffee grinder at 6:30 every morning. My dad grinding and doing his pour over. And back in the 90s, I don't think pour overs was a household term.
Yeah, right.
It may not even be now, but it was certainly a joy and a passion he had of just making fresh coffee 1 cup at a time every morning. I went off to college, bought myself a Mr. Coffee because there's nothing being sold in stores, and I needed caffeine at that point. But I could not understand how those coffee makers worked. All I saw was pour overs all my life.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, and I always get really romantic about pour overs. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get really into coffee and do a pour over, and then it's like every morning it just takes so much time, and I quickly stop doing it. Go back to our Keurig. That's pretty interesting. There's a lot of you and Sam from Peaks. He got kind of really started getting into coffee, like kind of with the popcorn maker at home as well. That's really interesting. I was looking into it a little bit of a few years ago of roasting at home sort of a thing. I forget the name of that website that sells. You can buy like small quantity of green beans for at home roasters and different accessories and equipment. But there's that one where you like light the flame and then you kind of put it in like the tumbler and you sit there and hand tumble the beans. And I thought about getting one of those, but I'm glad I didn't, because it would just be sitting in my basement right now, not being used. So yeah. Did you? So when did you start to think of coffee as like more than really start to get into it more than a hobby?
Yeah. So it was probably around 2014. We had a few friends that enjoyed my coffee, so I was like giving away a lot of coffee. I think I got started with sweetmarias.com.
Yeah,
that's a small batch green coffee buying place for home roasters, essentially. Yeah. And got to the point where I tapped my father-in-law and asked, "Hey, can you help me build a roaster?" Because this little guy, I had graduated to like a B more, which was like a microwave-sized drum roaster. And then beyond that, I was like, I just want to duplicate this, but bigger. So with his engineering intuitiveness, we took a electric convection oven that you would find, in a home, and we attached a drum to it so I could keep up with some friends and family stuff. Cool. And so it was at that point when I was like, I'm investing like a lot of time and some money just to keep my friends happy. I wonder, is there something here? At that point, I was working for Hillside's Children's Center, actually right near the studio here.
Yeah.
And I was going to, 3 or 4 different counties a week, just driving all over, meeting with kids. Loved the job, but my wife and I started to imagine what would like working and living in Syracuse. So we had bought a home on the north side here in Syracuse off of James Street, and just thought, like, I wonder if there's a way. And so we started walking the city, on the weekends, and just wondering, like, oh, I wonder if a cafe could go in here. I wonder if a cafe could go in there. And we intentionally wanted to be outside of the downtown Armory Square. We wanted to be more of a neighborhood vibe. So we almost got a place right across from St. Joe's, the old Donzi's Meat.
Yeah.
Housing Visions has since purchased it and did a great job rehabbing it. It was just the timing didn't line up. When we were there, we could kind of maybe sneak in the back, maybe not, and take a look at like what this building was. So that was my first business plan, was someplace, a place on the north side. When that didn't work out, I was like, well, now I have a business plan, and I have, a bank that might lend me some money. Like, should we really like do this?
Yeah.
And so it was, I believe, the tail end of 2015 that we found the spot at 509 West Onondaga Street, which is our first location. Took us over a year and a half to kind of get through all the red tape and the zoning and making sure that it was the old McMahon Ryan Advocacy Center before they moved to Genesee Street.
Yeah.
And so just getting that zoned over to, getting a variance for a restaurant took a little bit of time. Had to do a few infrastructure, fire alarm system, that sort of thing. So all brand new and terrifying to somebody who's never ran a business before, and trying to just walk through that process. Fortunately, I had a tenant in my house who would constantly smell coffee roasting smoke coming out of my basement. And he came down one time thinking there's a fire and it's just me roasting coffee. So we got to talking. He's like, you need to meet someone. And he connected me to Dominic Robinson. And at that point, he was doing a pilot program on the north side for budding entrepreneurs.
Okay.
So I got into I think it's called First Start. It's now under Center State CEO sort of umbrella.
Yeah.
But if you think of the Salt City Market vendors, they all went through the same process that I went through. I was just on the, kind of like they were experimenting back then. So I was able to get some business advice and go through their training program, which was invaluable.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's something like that in Syracuse was huge.
Yeah, that's really cool. Did you have were there who did you have to look up to and like that, like to figure out like what to do? Where did you go like to learn, where like, I was just talking to Paul on the pod, like who was here earlier to do a podcast, and he got started in an ice cream business before YouTube was big and you could find a million videos on how to create a business or an ice cream business. So where did you like go for the inspiration or education and that kind of stuff? Was it just books and YouTube and all that?
Yeah. So from the business end of things, I went real old school. That training track, I did a day at OCC, and they're just like, go to your local library and pull up the numbers. So I would literally go to the library on weekends, pull out these books and these stats of like what a net annual profit for, a publicly traded company like Starbucks, and then sort of like walk backwards from there. So it felt, especially in today's day when I could just ask ChatGPT on what the net annual profit is and develop a business plan for me.
Yeah.
It feels very antiquated, but it was a huge learning process from the business end of things. So I've always been a big reader. I'd always be reading books. And then obviously the training program helped a lot. But a lot of it was just good old-fashioned, put together a plan, run numbers. If you don't like running numbers, that's usually the hardest part. I like to see what numbers can do for me, so that was always intriguing for me. I hated writing the narratives and the avatar customer, because everybody drinks coffee. So who's just going to come by my spot?
I know. I hate that stuff when it's like, who is your customer? Well, it's somebody who drinks coffee. I can tell you that much.
Yeah. As far as inspiration goes, my wife and I probably ever since 2014, every time we'd travel, we'd go to all the coffee roasting coffee shops. Yeah. So if you're not roasting your own coffee, we wouldn't spend too much time there. So we did Philly trips, New York City trips. When we went out to California, was introduced to Intelligentsia Coffee. They had a drink on there that inspired the Cueslandia, and that sort of thing. So when we travel, we just make sure we're going to go to coffee shops, and get the vibe. And there's actually a place in Philly, is a pizza shop, a place in Philly that inspired our Pay It Forward board as well.
Oh, cool.
Where somebody would buy forward a slice of pizza. And I just thought it was such an interesting concept, to where people can buy a seat at my cafe, and if they didn't have their wallet or couldn't afford our coffee, that if somebody else could and wanted to pay for it, that's a great win.
Yeah, that's a place where it's like Post-it notes that are all over the wall. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we did that at I shouldn't say we, but years ago I did the social media for Franco's Pizza, and we started something similar there. And that stuff's cool. It's hard to find that stuff that feels authentic, when you do those kind of things. You guys, do a good job with it. Is that all the cafes, or is that just the original?
It's just the original at this point, and we had to pull it during COVID.
Yeah.
So we're working on bringing it back and trying to rehashing it a little bit. But yeah, for right now, it's just at our original location.
Yeah, that's cool. So, all right. So you're kind of getting a coffee, you're getting into the numbers, and when does the realization that you're going to open up the first cafe and all that kind of stuff? What does that look like during that time? Or are you guys asking yourselves if you're out of it, or are you thinking like, man, we're going to be millionaires?
Yeah, no. We actually had so it was November, is early or mid fall. And we realized we were pregnant with our third kid, and we were planning on opening the cafe in January. And due to some red tape, we didn't get January, and we didn't open till March 27th is our birthday. That's when we opened at 509. The realization set in about a week into it, where I was there 10, 12 hours a day, and we have 2 kids at home and a third on the way. And I feel my body, just standing all day. I at that point, I was roasting the coffee in the morning. My first barista would show up at 7 o'clock to open the cafe, or 6:30 to open the cafe. I would then help the team do the barista shift.
Yeah.
I would then continue roasting for whatever I needed the rest of the day. And then I would count the drawer, close up shop, go home, spend a couple hours with the family, get up at 5 o'clock, do it all over again.
Yeah.
So it didn't take long to realize I'm either going to just not be home with my family, or I'm going to burn out pretty quick. So that realization set in and said, I need to hire a manager, and I need to be okay not being here. And so May 22nd, our third child, our daughter, was born, and I had a manager on, and I could take a few days off to be in the hospital. And I thought that was like the biggest win. And like my business savviness kicked in. But truth be told, that was like our toughest year.
Yeah.
We had some, mental health issues. We got 3 kids. It was a very tough year in a business that people, rightly so, customers expect a great experience and an owner that can only be there only so often to keep dialing things in, and it was just a big struggle.
Yeah.
So I always call the first year was that was our year of survival. If we can make it through this year, we can make it. And we did. Yeah. And it was during that time also is where we connected with some folks from the Allen Foundation.
So the market's been open for 2 years. And what year did you guys get started at 509?
2017.
Okay, gotcha.
Yep. So it was around 2018 where we sat down with some folks, and they asked if we'd be interested in putting a coffee shop into this concept that is now the Salt City Market.
Yeah.
And the person asked me, he's like, are you like a real business person? Or is this just like a mom and pop, sort of like a passion project, a labor of love? Because I think most people, if you've lived in Syracuse, you don't open up at 509 West Onondaga Street if you're thinking bottom line only. And so that was a very real question for me. And I was thinking to myself, what do I want out of this? Obviously, I quit my job and, put some time and energy in this passion of coffee roasting. Do I want to move on from coffee roasting, or do I want to be a business owner, or do I just want to do what I'm doing?
Yeah.
So I, brought that back to Maria, and we chatted about it, and we're like, let's give it a shot. Let's try this being business owners kind of deal.
Did you thought about yourself as like a business owner, like in that light prior to that question? Like, did you think this is a business and I'm a business owner, or were you kind of thinking up to that point, like, yeah, I'm doing this full time and I quit my job, but it's kind of just more fun than anything else?
Yeah, looking back on it, I look at it as like, this was like the next part of the adventure of my life. That this could be a really fun thing. Obviously, there was a lot of panic attacks trying to get open. With folks saying, no, you can't do this. You can't put up, your deck like this. Like, there's just so much stress involved with getting it open. It really sort of tempered my, this is like just a fun adventure. But once we got rolling, once we dialed in some of our recipes, we feel like time has told us that we built something really special over there on the west side. And it's probably our most loyal fan base is those early adopters that said, hey, Salt City's pretty cool, being over in the west side, something different. And it's like sort of a hidden gem, right? You're kind of driving over to OCC or wherever you're going, taking that stretch, and you don't automatically think, hey, craft coffee that's roasted in house. So when you walk in, you have all the smells and the experience. It's like, oh, cool, this is cool. So that's been exciting to hear that feedback and see that over time.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, so like, I think I'm a business owner, and I am a business owner, but I think I'm a business owner, and then I get presented with something where I'm like, oh, I'm not really doing anything yet. So that's really interesting. Like to hear you say that he asked you that question. I'm like, I've been in those shoes before, where it's like, oh, I'm doing something really cool and interesting, and I own my own business, and then it's like, oh, I really haven't done anything yet, have I? So yeah. All right, so you've got that, and then the next step for you all is the Salt City Market. Is that right?
Yeah. So we started having those conversations early on, just kicking around ideas. True to Maria and Aaron, we went out and visited like open air markets and food halls and stuff like that to try to get a gist of like what could we do. And somewhere in there, the market came back and asked, hey, you're doing coffee. Would you be willing to like offer like beer and wine? And we're like, oh, I like to drink beer. I always wanted that T-shirt that says coffee in the morning, beer in the evenings. And I was pretty pessimistic when they came back and said, hey, how about like, would you carry full liquor? It's like, I don't know that game. I don't know. We're in a really interesting part of town. Could a bar work over here? That sort of thing. Fortunately, for my sake, Maria came across with a big win and said, hey, we started this adventure. Let's just see where it takes us. And so we're like, yeah, we can figure out the cocktails and the liquor piece. So that's where the concept of coffee by day and then a cocktail bar by night was formed. It was just these sort of open conversations of like, how do we want this space to be? The market asking, hey, is your willingness here? And we're just able to have great conversations of what do we want this space to be and feel like. And so eventually, as you can tell, we create a pretty interesting spot there in downtown. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's the most modern coffee shop. Like if you just look at it as a coffee shop, it's the most modern coffee shop that exists in Syracuse. It doesn't have a feel of like, oh, it's a local coffee roaster, or a local coffee company. It definitely has a feel of like a big business, which is great. We need more of that around here. As great as I love the local landscape and local business owners, it all still feels local, and there's something to be said about going into a business that's locally owned and operated here in Syracuse or wherever it is and having it feel like something that's national. I think in my head, that's kind of the goal. I'd love to see more and more restaurants that you walk into around here that feels like you're in a national place. And that's kind of how I feel when I go into the Salt City Market and Salt City Coffee and the bar there. So,
Yeah, our one of our struggles there is helping people separate that Salt City Coffee, Salt City Bar is a separate entity from Salt City Market.
Yeah.
We do have a lot of Salt Cities going on. We love the name Salt City Market.
Yeah.
It's just when customers walk in, they're like, oh, the Salt City Bar, that's what the market. And we're like, we're locally independent operators. But it's fun to be able to explain it to folks as well.
All right. So you open up in the market, and then it just seems like from there you all have expanded and spread like wildfire across Syracuse.
Yeah. So when we entered into COVID, and other entrepreneurs, business owners out there will know how tricky and scary that was. And do we shut down? Do we stay open? How do we pivot? We only had 509. And when you're thinking about like all the money available to businesses to stay open, 509 was a very small revenue generating spot compared to like, full-fledged restaurants or multiple locations. So we really entered into COVID, on one hand, very disadvantaged. Like we weren't going to get a lot of money, even though we were trying to grow staff because we knew what was, the market was coming up. Due to all the construction snafus, the project kept getting delayed through COVID. So there's a lot of things like working against us in that, along with like everybody else, And so at one point, I was just telling Maria, I was like, I don't know, maybe we should just like call it, just like wait it out. And she made the argument of, if we can just like pivot and push through, I think we're going to be okay. And so during those during those internal struggles of like what I'm spinning my wheels for hardly any money, and we're working like 3 times as hard. Like should we carry on? Is at that point, and along with the market delays, where the university location became a prospect. So the previous cafe had exited, and the place was vacant for a little while. So we started talking. They reached out to us and asked, like, are you interested? And we're like, no, we got the market thing coming online. Plus all the internal struggles of like, do I even want to be doing this? And came back again. And eventually, the market got delayed again. We're like, well, we don't know. The market is a huge project, by the way. It's 20,000 square foot, multiple stories. There's a lot of moving pieces. And amid all the shutdowns and worker shortages, like there was just there wasn't a clear, is this going to get finished? So working from that, it's so funny looking back and being like, all that uncertainty was all true and real. And hey, look, everything worked out, But at the time, we're like, is this project going to finish in a reasonable amount of time? We've already started beefing up our staffing to be prepared. And so we then said, yes, let's go into university and give that a shot. So market opened in January 29th, 2021. And I think March 4th, 2021, we opened university. And so
How the hell did you guys pull that off?
Yeah,
Man,
going from a staff of 5 for 4 years and being very much owner involved, and everybody knows me because I'm coming in every day, to 3 locations in the matter of 2 months.
Wow.
I would not recommend it. That's not the way it's supposed to go.
That's wild. Yeah. And so you've got the 3, and then you've got the 4th now in Fayetteville, right?
Yeah. So, also a funny story. In all this growth, my admin work has become very tough to do, so I don't check my emails as often and all these different things. So Shem and Taylor, great people over at Soleil, he must have emailed me a few times. I think I only got one. He was just interested. He's being selective on who he's talking to about his family and plans, have been moving them in different directions. He's just checking to see if anybody'd be interested in taking it over. And so Marie and I were having coffee one Saturday, and just flippantly, I was like, oh, by the way, Soleil's interested in possibly selling. She's like, oh, how do you know that? I was like, well, because he emailed me. And she's like, well, haven't you gotten back to him? And so that next week she's like, I'll just check. I'll just inquire and see what's going on. And that led to us having more conversations and running some numbers and doing all that sort of thing. It ended up working out well for them, and working out well for us. So
yeah, that's great. So, I mean, what's your approach to that as a business owner? It sounds like you're really analytical about decisions that you make. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. Maria's the feelings and emotions, and I am the non-emotion and analytical kind of person. And so I think we make a really good team in that. Yeah. So we're both dreamers, so we both can like get carried away with like all the things that we can do. But then when it comes time to like say, hey, if we borrow this amount of money, are we going to be okay?
Yeah.
Are we going to make it back? Are we going to be able to pay everybody and pay everything?
Yeah.
And so now we're in the space of talking about like what's next, what's on the horizon, and we have a much better balance of how to talk about these projects and stuff like that. Knowing ourselves, knowing our team, what kind of energy does our team have, and understanding the burden and excitement that we get to offer to our team members too also comes into strong consideration.
Was there ever a moment when you opened 509 or before that you were thinking, maybe I should just like get labels and sell a ton of bags of coffee out of the basement and save up a ton of money before we do it? Or was it just kind of like, listen, we just need to kind of take the leap and go for it?
Yeah. There were moments where I thought I'm making a huge mistake.
I asked this question for this reason, because as like a business owner, we've never taken a big swing here. And so I've always looked up to business and restaurant owners who, I'm like, the business and restaurant owners are, going out and getting a loan and renting a space and signing a 5, 10, whatever year lease and hiring staff. Like, those are risks that we don't have to take here. And I could not, I can't fathom putting myself in that position, So in my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to try and sell 100,000 bags of coffee out of my basement and then move on from there.
Yeah. There were times where I thought I was making a big mistake. The concept and the model in general, lots of coffee shops everywhere. It can't be that bad of a model. And everyone says location. I know that was not an A location if you're looking at A, B, C, D in terms of real estate. So it's not an A location, but there was a few moments, and a lot of people telling me, you don't need to open a shop. We already got X, X, Y, and Z coffee shops in the area. Yeah. What are you actually bringing to the table? And that, to me, that feedback was the most devastating of like, so what am I doing here? And then also helping me rise to the challenge of like, nothing bad about anybody else, but I can do coffee too. Yeah. And I can do it in a way that I think customers can get excited about. Yeah. Whether or not we were going to make it, I had in my head like a 3-year timeline. If I couldn't provide for my family within those 3 years, I'm super grateful to my wife to let me even like take a risk like this, because looking back, I'm like, what kind of father quits his job to like start a business at like in their mid-30s? Yeah. Plenty of people do it, I know, but it's just, there's an additional weight to that. And so I gave myself a 3-year timeline, and like, I am either gonna move on from this and I just have to like make up for lost time, or we can make this thing successful. And it got hairy. It got hairy. It was, I think 4 years is when the market opened. And so like I was getting close to that 3-year timeline and realizing like, how does anybody make money in coffee, and then realizing like, understanding at the get-go, it's a volume-based business. So you sell one, $5 latte an hour, you're clearly not going to last too long. But if you can get, 10, 15, 20, 30, you know, however many transactions an hour the numbers shake out.
Yeah.
It's doable.
Yeah.
But that's real.
Yeah.
Those feelings are real.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, we're going through that right now. I mean, I was looking back at, you know, just a couple months ago, I was like on the verge of, okay, so I'm going to do this on Saturdays, you know, and I'm going to go get a job, you know, doing this for someone else where I could have benefits and have a guaranteed paycheck. Maybe I'm going to do that. And, you know, so, you know, right now it's, right now we're just almost to the point of where it's like, okay, we can kind of take a breath and sigh a little bit, you know. And it's really interesting for us because our growth is coming outside of Syracuse. You know, like as much of a reputation in as many places that we work with in Syracuse, you'd think it'd be an easy pull to be like, hey, we can, you know, help you out. But it's the restaurants and businesses outside of Syracuse in Rochester, Poughkeepsie, New York City. They're like, you're amazing. Come here. Here's our money. You know, and yeah, it's really wild to you know. Experience that, but yeah, so we're just kind of getting to that point, you know.
If I may ask a question, what do you think broke that barrier for you to get into other markets?
Time. So last year I had, just dedicating time. So we started out as Central New York because that's where we're out of, and then my brother, who lives down in Rockland County, him and his wife are pastors and congers at a CMA church down there. And so I was always talking to him about like eat local New York and we have this card, or eat local CNY, we have this card. And he was like, and he said, I know a bunch of restaurant owners down here. We should do the card here. So we started Eat Local Rockland, and we had like maybe 10 restaurants down there. We sold like a handful of cards, nothing crazy. But we weren't putting out a lot of content down there either. So I had an event here in Syracuse. I think it was the Buy Local Bash, and a woman came up to the table and she bought an Eat Local CNY card. And as she was walking away, she was like, I wish you had this down where I live. And I was like, where do you live? She said, I live in Rockland County. I was like, we have an Eat Local Rockland card. And so I was like, here, take this card. You can have it. And she's holding both. She's like, I wish you had one card. And so I was like, we should make it Eat Local New York and just start reaching out to restaurants all across the state to try and join. So that's when we shifted the name and everything. So that was when we went to New York, but I was still just posting and working, contacting restaurants here for the most part. We had a couple, we have a couple in like Buffalo. We're getting more in Rochester. We have a couple in, you know, Rockland County area. But I think it was last year at some point, it wasn't like, I mean, you're a church guy, so you get this. We went to a luncheon with this visiting minister from South Africa, who just so happened to be some like billionaire business guy who invented some stupid thing for like farming in the Netherlands. I still don't remember the story, but he's very wealthy and he's a minister. So there was nothing directly that he like said in that like meeting that was like, Anthony, you're going to go to Rochester and make a lot of money, you know. But when I left that meeting, I got in my car and I was just like, I need to go to Rochester and I need to get there like tomorrow. And so I just decided, all right, I'm going to start going out to Rochester one day a week. I'm just going to go around, find restaurants, just go, you know, do what we do, go get lunch and take photos and go from there. And I really only went a handful of times out there before, you know, things just got kind of like that was late last summer, and then, you know, our son was born in November. So I stopped going for a little bit. But the first day I had it planned, it was a Tuesday. I was like, I'm going to Rochester. And this is like so small to think it's like such a big story. But it's really just, but I got in my car the morning I was going to go to Rochester, and I felt like just really scared. I was like, nobody knows me in Rochester. Like I'll go to Utica. There's some people that know me in Utica. I'll go to Utica. You know, it'll be different content. And I was like sitting in my car having this like internal, like it felt like a spiritual moment, even though it wasn't like, you know, it felt like a spiritual moment, but it wasn't necessarily a spiritual moment. So anyways, I was sitting there. I'm like looking, all right, where am I going to go in Utica? And then I was just like, you just go to Rochester. So I started going to Rochester once a week, and we went just this past week out there and did a couple of shoots with some different restaurants, and the places we went to, they were just like, wow, I can't believe you're here. This is so wonderful. Like the hospitality and like open arms that we felt from the couple places we went to in Rochester was unlike anything we've ever gotten in here in Syracuse. And yeah, so I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because they see Eat Local New York and they see we have a big following and they're like, great. But even in Poughkeepsie, we had a restaurant reach out and they were like, hey, will you come down? We'll leave a gift card at the bar and you can come down and make a video for us. And our response was, well, we charge for videos and here's our structure. And they were like, great, when can you get down here? And wow. 99% of the restaurants, a competitor of yours asked us to come to make a video, and we told them the price, and they laughed at us. And so it's just like just a very different world. I think Syracuse is really far behind the times a lot with our food here in our food scene compared to the rest of the state and the country, and things that are even starting to pop off here in terms of like content that works were popping off in New York City 5 years ago, or 2 years ago. So I don't know why that is, but it is. You know what I mean? And but yeah, it's just like getting out of Syracuse. We've just started to be welcomed by a lot of restaurants, and they're like, we love what you're doing and all that kind of stuff, and here's our money.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been great.
There's still a lot of work for all of us to do in helping Syracuse get out of, I call it like a small town mindset. It's like a small to moderate city, but it reminds me, I grew up in the Adirondacks.
Okay.
Of there was like one gas station, and when another gas station wanted to go in, everybody like, why? We already got one.
Right.
And it just feels like this small town mindset rather than like a growth mindset of like, what could we become if we embraced some new ideas, and super encouraging about 81 coming down and the potential. Right. I see the potential of the things that could change, but you look at the history of just how much money has been sunk into, and we're not picking on Syracuse. This is kind of fairly true in a lot of different cities too. Yeah. But you get to see comparisons of like places that have seen a lot of money come in and how that actually does revitalize, and a lot of money comes in and it's like it went into a sieve. Right. And we're like, where did it go? Yeah. But also this is, food and restaurants and beverages specifically, being able to have the courage to be ahead of your time a little bit. Yeah, for sure. I know that's one of our, maybe not our biggest critique, but I hear often that we may not have enough sweet forward drinks, that we're trying to lead with the coffee being the main flavor. Yeah. And not, we call it muddying it up with a lot of sweetener and this and that. We want balanced drinks. And sometimes, like our cereal milk is very sweet forward. We always try to have a sweet forward latte. But also like with our espresso tonics, that hasn't gained traction here, even though every other larger city I go to, including Rochester, like there are tonics everywhere, because it's a very balanced drink, and so we feel the pinch on that. Obviously, as a business, you want to sell what people will buy, so you stay in business. Yeah. But we also want to be authentic to the product that we tout, and since we roast that coffee, we see everywhere from where it's grown to all the hands that process it, which is very intensive, to getting on a boat, to coming here, sitting in a warehouse, us trying to pick it up as soon as possible, roast it fresh, get it into your mouths and bellies as soon as possible. Like the amount of work involved, we want you to actually enjoy and appreciate the coffee itself. Yeah. And so finding that balance is the pinch of being courageous enough to like try to set a new trend now and again. Yeah. But also having tried and true things that people will come out for regardless of where they are in their journey for adventurous food and beverage.
Where do you think the world or I guess Syracuse, like, we're talking about the trends, and John Page and I talked a while ago on a podcast of Like, because if I'm going to look for a special to release at 3-1 Fried, and I'm blanking on something, I'll go Google, like go on Instagram and type in fried chicken sandwiches in Los Angeles or New York City or Nashville or like bigger cities to see kind of what's happening. And so I could identify what the trend is that's hitting Los Angeles or New York City today in food, and then maybe jump ahead of the game and open that concept or start that concept in Syracuse today. But would it work, or do I have to naturally wait the 5 or 6 years for it to get to Syracuse before it's really Korean corn dogs, for example? As stupid as of a thing as that is, and Nicole and I talk about it and are obsessed with them from an Instagrammer perspective. But if a Korean corn dog thing started in Syracuse today, would it be successful, or are people going to be like, what the hell is that? And so we talk about that a lot. And I just think about that with like coffee, because like in Austin, like when I lived in Austin, there's coffee shops in Austin that were like super trendy. And if you go in there and try and order a vanilla latte, you get like laughed out of the building. It's like, we don't do that here. We make coffee and that's it. So I think about that with with the coffee shops in our area. How true to the craft do they need to be? Like, we roast the beans and here are the beans and you're going to enjoy the beans, or is it, or should they try to be chasing the trend of here's this cup of coffee with a rainbow coming out of it?
Yeah. I can recap my 36 hours a year. We talk about this with the team on that tension.
That's pretty funny. So you guys have those conversations?
We have these conversations constantly.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have a vanilla draft latte on at university campus, and not for nothing, back in 2012 or 2014 when I wanted to start, think about a cafe, I was like, cold brew on tap. I saw it once in New York City. That seems like a win for everybody, a win for me, the one who's going to be pouring it. It's a pretty one-touch thing.
Yeah.
It's a win for the customers. They get their drink faster, and it's just cool. Back then, it was cool.
Yeah.
And so obviously by the time I opened, Recess and others already jumped on that tap model, because it was, started off as a fad. You're always wondering what's going to be a fad and what's going to be a permanent fixture.
Yeah.
And then if you can get on the in-between on whatever the trend is, and the trend's going to last a little bit longer. I thought way back in 2012, a tap system for coffee is going to be a permanent fixture. And I'm just here to say I was right. I was not the first, but I was right. So we're experimenting with draft lattes. We saw it at La Colombe. And Peaks has a really good draft latte here just down the street from us on University. And so we've been seeing a lot of cold brew bars pop up around the country. And I just heard a stat, you can fact check me later, but every quarter last year, Starbucks sold 60% of their product was cold-based beverages.
That's wild.
And so that cold brew, ready-to-drink coffee market is growing. And so a year and a half ago when we pitched this to the team, we started to get laughed out.
Yeah.
As the owners, it didn't feel great to get laughed out, but we value the back and forths with the team, because we ultimately know if the team doesn't like it, they're going to have a harder time selling it.
Yeah.
So if you're, in your business 100%, that's not as big of a drawback. You can kind of like make changes and pivot immediately. Once you start growing, you have other considerations to make. We were talking about that a little bit before the podcast. But draft latte is one of those things that probably took us a year and a half from like idea to implementation. And so I don't know if Syracuse is ready for it. I just know it's a win on my baristas at a high volume cafe.
Yeah.
I think it's a win for the customers. They get their drink faster. We were able to get a cold brew concentrate that equals a espresso shot. So we're not just putting regular cold brew and diluting it more with milk. We have like a super concentrated cold brew that acts as espresso. So we're able to do it right as well. Because we tried it with just regular diluted cold brew, regular strength cold brew, I should say. And it just tasted watered down, and we didn't feel comfortable selling it. But we're able to figure it out. And so we may be a couple years ahead or it could be a fad and it's not a permanent fixture. But given the way that cold beverages look like they're going, I feel like it's at the very least a trend. It's not going to be a fad that dies in a year.
Yeah.
Kind of like hard seltzer. No offense.
That's growing, man. Tim just texted me yesterday and said, "What's your favorite hard seltzer flavor?" I was like, "You're either high or this is a trap. I don't know what you're either going to make fun of me in the next thing or." And he said he was going to make it for me, and that's when I asked if he was high, and he said yes. Which, by the way, everybody who's listening at home, Buried Acorn. That's our drinking game. Every time I mention Buried Acorn, you have to take a drink. So there it is. What was I going to say? Shoot, what was I just going to say? I forget. Well, one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what's your, oh, I know what I was going to say. It's surprising you said that about Starbucks and 60% with cold beverages, because I was thinking of like Tony Robbins has this story I've heard on a few podcasts or interviews he's done where they did this study. They had two people kind of set up like down the street from each other in New York City, let's say. One was holding a hot cup of coffee, one was holding an iced coffee. And what they would do is, as a person was walking by, they would say, "Can you hold this for me real quick? I need to tie my shoe." They would hand them their coffee, and then they would tie their shoe. They'd get up and take it. And then maybe a block or however much further down the line, someone would be there to ask them, give a response to a question. And so they would tell them a story and be like, "Do you feel positive or negative? Like, like what's your feeling sense after I read this sentence to you?" And it was like 80% of the people who held an iced coffee had a negative response, and the majority of people who held the hot coffee had a positive response to it. And I've always thought that about coffee, and just kind of like the marketing towards it. It's like, okay, so we need to push hot drinks primarily. People are going to have more of a comforting feeling about our product if we constantly talk about hot drinks. So that's wild to hear that Starbucks sells 60% or cold beverages.
Yeah, and you just might be old with me because there's nothing like a hot cup of coffee in your hands in the morning, even if it's 80 degrees.
Right.
I will drink cold brew the rest of the day, but I need my hot cup of coffee in my hands.
Yeah.
I do think we're running into another generational shift where maybe some of the younger folks have been introduced to coffee through cold brew.
Yeah.
With milk and sugar and creamer and all that stuff, and get that acquired taste, and then suddenly you need it. Otherwise, you get foggy. And, the caffeine addiction is a real thing. So thanks for keeping us in business, nature. And so I think we're running into that too. Like there's another new demographic that is drinking coffee, which is great. Yeah. And I think the numbers are skewing lower and lower of when folks are starting coffee.
Yeah.
I'm no health expert, but
yeah,
it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening for sure. So what's some advice that you would give to a business owner who's listening? Maybe there could be anybody, but let's say it's somebody who's like kind of, just sort of getting started. What's a piece of what's something that really helped you two out when you were getting things going?
Yeah, I think it's a two-tone. Don't be discouraged by the haters or the folks that can't see what you see. Push through that. But also don't ignore advice.
Yeah.
And that is to me, that was the toughest thing, is to be able to sort out, people who don't believe in you or see what you see versus the people who are, offering caution or direction.
Yeah.
And so being able to separate and discern those two things were very important for me.
Well, listen, man, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate this, Anthony. Yeah,
everybody who's listening, if you're going to buy coffee, go to Salt City Coffee. Thanks.